Hey, y'all. Hey, it's JJ Conway. Welcome to Building Wealth Together, where our goal is to help you walk in abundance and leave a legacy. It's Mindset Monday, where we take the best teachings on mindset, motivation, and leadership and apply them to your life. This helps you get past the past and grow forward into abundance. Let's get into it. Hey, everybody. It's JJ Conway. I'm excited for our Mindset Monday. Been enjoying the UN International Women's Day celebration. It's fantastic to celebrate the achievements of women, especially looking forward to the Aspire Artemis event, creating impact and change through storytelling and the application of equalizing technology. Definitely something that I need to get better at, because I don't know about you, but I always thought that I was going to create change just by being awesome and making you see how awesome I am. And I've got to realize, and I've come to realize over the last couple of years that, that's not really the way to change anybody's mind about anything, because when people try to do that to me, I sure enough don't change my mind about a thing they're doing. All right. So again, I'm JJ Conway, and I want to welcome you to our Mindset Monday. We are continuing our study of Cheryl Klein's book, Zoned In. And this has been a fantastic book. I met Cheryl, for those of you who weren't here last week, I met Cheryl at Women in Cloud up in Microsoft last January, right before COVID started, before it became such a big deal. I remember being really challenged when she asked me to name a couple of high performing people that might want to work with her to up their game. And it wasn't that I was challenged by her pursuing referrals. That's an absolutely awesome thing to do. But for me, it was realizing that I wasn't at the top of my game, and that most of my friends, like my friends, most of us, we weren't at the top of our game. We were really just frazzled, overworked, overwhelmed, trying to do a million different things. And a lot of us were doing a lot. It's not that we weren't doing anything. We were doing a lot, but we weren't accomplishing a lot. We were pouring a lot of ourselves into organizations. We were pouring a lot of ourselves into our children. We were pouring, actually, I'll be honest, I don't think most of us were pouring much of ourselves into our husbands. I think we all got to get better about that, right? Like even this morning, I don't know how many of you saw my spring break post. It was all about the snuggle time with the cubby, and I'm going to do this with little man. And then I got to the end of the post. I was like, I didn't even put my husband on my own spring break calendar. Like I need to do that. He's like the head man in charge around here. I need to make sure I show him some love. So we're going to change. I'm going to change that up a little bit. But I mean, just thinking about being at the top of our game and being in the flow and really accomplishing what we want to accomplish. A lot of us are getting a ton of things done. But at the end of the day, when our head meets the pillow, or at the end of the month, when we review everything that we have spent time and money on, has it really helped us accomplish our goals? Has it moved us towards our goals? And I'll tell you what, that conference in January, I came away with two things. One, it was solidified for me that I wanted to be a public speaker as I prepared to retire from the military, because that was my first speaking engagement where I was really raw and really me, and it was really well received. And, I had speaking engagements, but I had never really told my story, and I wasn't sure how it would land, but I needed to test it out and in an opportunity where I wasn't going to sink or swim. And the response was overwhelming. So that was one thing I took away. But the other thing that I took away is that it was time for me to study what the best do so that I can be the best, so that I can be at the top of my game, and so that I can be who God has called me to be. See, God has called a lot of us to be more than what we are. And we play small because we're worried about what everybody else thinks. We play small because we're afraid of success. We play small because we're worried about upsetting our family dynamic, our church dynamic, our volunteer dynamic, our work dynamic. Has anybody else out there been told by your coworkers, hey, stop working so hard, you're making the rest of us look bad? Has anybody ever been told at church, hey, stop trying so hard, it's not really that important? I mean, how many of us have had somebody else who is living a mediocre, lukewarm life try to tell us that we need to quit working so hard, that we need to quit trying so hard, or that we need to quit living so hard? And I thought that's what life was. Like I needed to tone myself down and tone my life down and tone my talents down, not realizing that to do so was absolutely an offense to the great God who gave me these abilities and talents and wanted me to use them. We read that scripture about hide it under a bushel, and we sing the little song, this little light of mine, and I'm hide it under a bushel. No, I'm going to let it shine, right? And we think that and sing that and we say that and we teach our children that, but we're not internalizing that for our lives. We're only talking about that for our spiritual lives. But the Lord has called each of us with talents, gifts, and abilities that not only will help us reach more people for Him, but will also help us connect and be successful and be able to utilize what He's given us to equip His people. And I wish it wouldn't have took me so long to learn it. I think I spent 2 years as a pastor feeling horrible about myself because I didn't sing. I wasn't that nice person in Walmart that just chats you up in the line. And the next thing you know, you showing up at their church. Like that just wasn't me up until now. And I'm better about it. I've learned to be more friendly. I clearly have work to do on that, right? I have work to do. I admit it. I'm not so vain anymore. I have work to do. I admit it. But I've learned how to meet people where they are better than I used to 10 years ago. Let's just say it like that, right? There's always room for improvement. The biggest room in the house, right, is the room for improvement. So there's always some growth that we can do, but I spent so much of my time lamenting that I wasn't like this person and I wasn't like that person and people didn't like me this way and people didn't love my singing voice, and it really took a while before I said, "Okay, Lord, if you don't send me the singers, I'm going to sing." And if you don't send me people to go invite others to go come in from Walmart, well, I'm going to have to go do it. So you're going to have to help me. And then I began having the community classes, and wouldn't you know, the community classes began to draw people in. And I had somebody come in who said, "I really appreciate what you're doing because this is our area of giftedness as well. And we just felt like we couldn't use it in the church world. But what we're seeing is that you are using your area of giftedness to build up the church and the people of God." And I was like, that's what the Lord's been doing, right? And so, when it comes to really getting in the flow, sometimes we got to get past the past. And we got to get past the limitations that everybody else has put on us. And we got to get past the limitations that we put on ourselves. And I'm not going to speak for y'all today. I think back at my limitations that I put on myself. Why did I put limitations on myself? I could go way back into high school. Yeah, high school or junior high. I think it started in junior high, where I became aware that if I got an A on the test and other kids got C's and B's and some D's, that when the teacher handed me my test, there was a snicker that went around in the room. And I was so desperate for friendship that I learned to downplay my straight A's because I wanted to make friends. Well, guess what? I didn't make friends anyway because I'm just the person I am. And that didn't really work. But I tell you, that hope and that desire, and that always feeling like I have to play small in order to fit in, or that I had to play small in order to get anywhere in life, that had stuck with me for a very, very long time. The worst part about it was, you are who you are. And unless you change and grow, or in my case, allow the Lord to help me change and grow, oh my goodness, unless we change and grow, you're not going to change those things because it's who you are, right? And so when I saw chapter 2, Zero Excuses, I said, oh boy, this is the chapter that's going to strip away my hindrances that I'm whining and crying about, and that I'm making the reason why I can't get where I want to go. Instead of accepting the fact that really, truly, with God on my side, I have been fully resourced to do anything that I want to achieve. Now, I do subjugate my desires to the Lord's desires, but you know what I found out? The Lord wants more for me than half the time I want for me. He wants me to do better than half the time I can even imagine about. He wants me to have more impact than I ever thought was possible. And we say these things like, oh, well, I'm going to let God have his way. But in reality, what we're doing is we're holding back. We're just holding back. We're just holding back. And so today I want to walk you through chapter 2. She's again, the book here is Zoned In by Cheryl Klein. You got the link down there. You can go get your copy. She starts off talking about world-class athletes. And for those of you who are not familiar with Ms. Klein, she is a high-performance coach that got her start working with Olympians, okay? And so she now coaches executively, business people, entrepreneurs, people like that as well. But her background is with Olympians, all right? And she says when world-class athletes set their sights on the Olympics, there are no guarantees that they're going to even make it there, let alone make it onto the podium. And I had a friend who went to the Olympics, who almost went to the Olympics. She went to the Olympic Training Center, was one of my roommates in college, one of the most inspiring people I've ever met. And she got out there. She was the top of her game in archery, and everybody just knew she was going to take the cake. And right before they actually went forward to the Olympics, she had a health issue, a very serious health issue that took her out of the running. And I do believe she went forward again 4 years later, but just the complications and everything, she ended up having to switch paths. So when I read this chapter, I thought about her, and I thought about her struggle and so many things that she's had to overcome, both in her body and in her personal life, to get where she has gotten. And then I thought about how, okay, her timing for this didn't work, but she didn't let that stop her from being excellence. She picked up something else that she could do in the confines of her injuries and the body and the things like that. And then she became number one in the world at that. And she's had a series of things. I think she's gone from archery to windboarding, to all kinds of different things. And every time she rises to the top. And so Cheryl here has interviewed lots of Olympic hopefuls and asked them about the moment where they decided to go for it. And she said that almost all of them, she says all of them said essentially the same thing. It was like tunnel vision. When they made the decision, there was no turning back. It was focus and zero excuses on their quest to be the best. And so we can take that for our life to make in perspective and in agreement with what we want out of life, first of all, right? And then we want to be able to move forward. Now, here's the thing, and this is why I brought up the past discussion earlier. One of the things that keeps us from moving forward is the memory of all the past inaction, the all past failures, the past everything else that we look at and we ruminate on, and we spend all our creative energy living in that past instead of moving forward, right? And so she says here, we have to understand there is a cost to inaction. And that cost may be in different areas, right? So one cost may be that it's always nagging at you, which is taking away your energy. See, if you haven't seen it yet, you could go back and look for a thing where this was a couple years ago. I was cleaning out my office, and it had just come into my awareness that we can take all of the clutter of our lives, we can take all the stacks of stuff that are on our desk, and we can box them up, and we can label them, and we can put them on the shelf or put them in the office. And we think it's okay because it's not affecting us anymore, it's not impeding our ability to do things. But what it's doing is it's taking up capacity. And the physical capacity of all those boxes in my office was one thing, but all these emotional things, that's a emotional capacity. That's an energy capacity. And so all of these things are taking up little teeny tiny bits of energy in our psyche. And so then whenever we want to move forward, guess what all these little teeny tiny things are doing? It's like it's like death by 1,000 paper cuts. They are keeping us from moving forward. Okay. So that's one cost of inactivity. All right. And so then she says, sometimes even if we don't work on whatever the important thing is, there is a cost to our inaction. Sometimes there is a contribution of an action, and it's not just valid and okay, but important. Okay. So what she's saying is there's a lot of inaction that hinders us from moving forward if we haven't properly dealt with it, released it, and moved forward. We got to let go of what's in the past and press forward to the future, right? Pressing forward towards the mark. But she's saying here, sometimes inaction is okay and important. Maybe the inaction was what you needed to be able to find the time or the money to take care of yourself. Maybe the inaction is what you needed to find a way to connect with your family. And that's what my post was about earlier today. A lot of people didn't probably, I've got a lot of new contacts ever since, some of the speaking engagements this year. And so people may not realize that for me, it is actually a big deal that I'm going to take time out of my day and sit on the couch and watch TV, because that's not my thing to do. I am not a big fan of TV, but my husband and my oldest love to watch these different shows. And so it was like, you know what? It's important to me to build connection and relationship with my family. And while I would rather be out going and doing something, if what with my teenage son really wants me to do is watch a show with him and play some video games with him, then I'm going to do that because it's important. And I'm going to figure the rest of the stuff out, right? And so we have to be careful. We have to be careful not to let some of those things become an excuse, but we also have to be able to not let our drive be an excuse to neglect the things that we say are important to us. And y'all all see my cup in almost everything that I do. I say that God and family, well, okay, so Steelers is not really the most important thing in my life, but I say God and family are at the top of my list, right? I say that God and family are at the top of my list, but do I show the Lord that he's at the top of my list? Do I show my family that they're at the top of my list? Do you show your family that they're at the top of your list? Do you show yourself that you're at the top of your list? Or do you tell yourself that you're way out in the garbage pail? Think about that for a second. What are you telling yourself about yourself through your actions and how you spend your money and how you spend your time? What are you telling yourself about yourself by how you spend your thought life? And we're gonna work on some steps to build that. If you haven't already joined my Authentic Abundance class, you need to go out there and get that class, because it will help you take charge of some of these self-limiting beliefs and start applying your energy towards the science of getting rich. So here is an exercise that I would like you all who are able to accomplish. You can just take a few seconds. I'll give you some time to think about it. It says here, write down one reason why you haven't taken action up till now on an important ambition. And I love how she adds at the end, then add, which I accept as history and I'm ready to commit to now. So one thing that I'm ready to commit to now that maybe I haven't taken action in the past. I know that one reason for me that I haven't taken action on an important ambition is because it's going to require me to get more organized. And I'm not going to stress about not being an organized person, right? Like, I'm not going to stress about that. That's not my gifting. There are other people who are way more organized, and I look forward to bringing them into my team so they can do my organization for me, right? But there are things that all of us can do, right? And there's things that I can follow up, and there's things that I can change so that I'm better about following up, because I was a lot better about following up when I was $800,000 in debt. Somehow, with the pressure off, my true self come out, right? It's just like spending. You know how those of you who've been in my money classes, I always talk about, from time to time, I talk about how I was really, really good with money when I was super, super broke, but then I wasn't broke anymore. And then I realized I'm not the nerd I thought I was. I'm really much more of a free spirit. As long as I got money in the account, I really do not like having to track my money. And you think, oh, well, you're this great financial planner and you're this great. Well, I am a great financial planner, and I harness the skills that I used when I was broke, because those are the skills that got me out of debt, right? But I also have to understand that I have this personality that really just wants to go have fun. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm a high D. I want to get the work done, but once the work is done, boom, I'm gone, right? I'm a high D I. So, we have to understand those things. And so one reason why I haven't taken the action that would help me achieve an important ambition is because I don't want to have to do the work of getting organized, and I don't want to have to sit down and dig into why I'm not organized. I mean, that's just me. You come up with yours for you. You don't have to post it in the comments, but think about that. Give that some thought. Maybe even write it down and make a commitment to yourself that you're ready to commit to an important goal. All right. And for those of you who are listening to this as part of the podcast, I do encourage you to go to the Building Wealth Together Facebook group so that you can watch the video, because I'm actually showing people the exercises that I'm speaking. Hopefully, I'm doing a good job of speaking as if you're only listening on the podcast. But if I missed something, just pray for me and join the video next time. All right. So she says here, you might be wondering why we need to make peace with previous inaction. And we talked a little bit about that, right? We got all these open loops in our life, and what they're basically doing is siphoning our energy and our awareness and keeping us from focusing really on what we need to do. But here she also talks about, life can be complex when it comes to being the best parent, spouse, friend, business owner, or employee that we can be. And maybe we were tending one bucket and all the others were put on hold, which is what happens a lot of us as professionals, right? And maybe it wasn't really your time to learn what you needed to advance in this other area and take consistent, bold action. Okay. Some of us have to go through what we have to go through. You know, this is in her book, so let me put the book down for a second. Maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, I learned, and some of you may already know this, but I didn't know this, okay? I learned that the reason a lot of trauma comes up for us when we're in our 30s, 40s, and 50s is because we've reached a level of physical and psychological safety that our body feels like and our subconscious feels like we can now handle and process the trauma. So when we were the scared 9-year-old fearing for our life, we couldn't really we really couldn't process that. We couldn't adapt to it as well. We couldn't handle that information and still do what needed to be done as a child to succeed in life, right? And so our subconscious may have held that back from us in a survival mechanism so that those memories wouldn't cloud our ability to grow up and get through life. Okay. And there's so much more to this than I, as a non-psychiatrist or non-neuroscience scientist, can really explain. But there's so much more to this. But by time we've reached a certain level of professional success, by time we reach a certain level of knowing who we are, now all of a sudden our body, our psyche, everything feels like I can handle this. So this is why a lot of these things bubble up. Okay. And so with a lot of these things bubbling up like that, we have to understand that, maybe 5, 10 years ago, we weren't ready to see this or ready to see that in ourselves. And so this is why we do want to give ourselves some grace, but we also need to make peace with the things of the past. And so this peace with the past frees us up so that we can train again and become that champion. I I had to, Cheryl talks about having to do this herself. And I don't think me reading her story is going to do her story justice. So I encourage you to get the book so that you can read it for yourself. She talks about her father being the rock of the family and how that transition from the father being the rock of the family to her being the rock of her family, how poignant it was. And it really made me think about the time when I wrote the book Overcome Inertia. If you haven't seen that book, in fact, let me put this up for you because I need to order new of them. I was going to show it to you and I realized I'm out. And so if you want a copy of that book, I will send it to you. I'm going to make a bulk order today, so you got to do it today. But when I wrote that book, it was me telling the story of how I got my life back together after a devastating divorce. The divorce where, I discovered my ex-husband liked other ladies than me, and I discovered I had 800 something thousand dollars of debt, and all of the drama and the falling apart of my ministry, and just all of those things just all crashing upon me at once. And how did I pick myself up off the ground? Okay. And I kind of went into this funk really where I wasn't able to do much. I was going through the motions. I could show up to work. I could drop my kid off at school, show up to work. I had other people working for me. I wasn't teaching by then at Air University. I was in an advisory role to the commander. So we making PowerPoints, doing his special projects, facilitating the protocol of all of our special guests, the Tuskegee Airmen and all them. And so I had people I had people to do a lot of that work for me. So I was in the space of truly trying to have to get used to my new life. And nothing was getting done outside of drop my kid off, go to work, pick my kid up, go home, maybe have food if we had something in the cupboard. Otherwise, go to church and hope that somebody was doing something. And go to church and try not to cry and then come home. And that was basically my life for a couple months, right? And so I made up my mind one day. I was in prayer and I was like, Lord, something's got to change. And he told me just to start with 10 minutes. Start with 10 minutes a day of prayer and 10 minutes a day of Bible study. And I honestly wasn't even doing that. I mean, here I was, this minister, but at that point, I'd been a minister for like 10 years. And because my whole world was wrapped up in the church and my ex-husband. And to do anything spiritual reminded me of how my whole world fell apart, and it was just so intertwined that it was really difficult for me to do anything other than show up. I'll go and show up, y'all. Look, have you ever been in a situation where like your heart wasn't in it, but you were going to show up so people didn't have something to say about you not showing up? Oh, I showed up. I showed up, but in my inside, oh my goodness, everything was falling apart. And so that first week after I did that first week, 10 minutes of Bible study, 10 minutes of prayer, 10 minutes of some kind of physical exercise, no matter how bad I felt, I would do those three things, 10 minutes each. And after about the first week, I realized that I was beginning to feel better. And I looked around my house and I made a list of all the tasks that are hanging over my head. And I knew there was no way I was going to get everything done. Okay. I mean, after all, it had already been at that point like 6 weeks since I had last mopped my bathroom floor. And other chores were more important, like paying this stack of bills or calling these bill collectors so I could actually do something about this stack of bills. Like that was way more important to me right now than mopping my my bathroom floor. So I grabbed a bottle of Windex and I sprayed the one big spot that had been taunting me for the last week, and I knocked that out. And then I went to go about paying my bills, and I felt better. I kept doing one step in front of the other, and I felt better and better, and I got stronger and stronger. And sometimes we may be disappointed in ourselves that it's only one little step, but one little step leads to the next and leads to the next and leads to the next. So I want to encourage you to take that first step. If you're in a situation right now where your life has crashed down around you and you don't know which way to go, I encourage you to spend some time in prayer and figure out what that first little step will be. And even if it's just something as simple as 10 minutes of prayer, 10 minutes of Bible study, and 10 minutes of walking every day, or just one of those tens every day, do it and commit to it, and it will serve you well. Now, before I close with our zoned in discussion today, I want to summarize some of the things that she's talking about as far as how we can clear a path to success. One of the things I didn't have in that time and that I'm endeavoring to build around me now is a support team. And it's hard to accomplish a goal when everything around us is at cross purposes to that goal. So like for the fitness, y'all know I'm trying to work on cutting out the sugar, and it's really hard to do that when everything around you is sugary sweets. And for me, my family likes sugary sweets, and they don't seem to have the brain or the health issues that are associated with them. I don't know, maybe their body chemistry is different. And so it's not like I have justification to say stop buying them. And so for me, if I don't have things that are already prepared that I can eat, and when the moment strikes me and I'm hungry, then it's very hard not to slip into that. But I can build myself a little bit of support into my life by connecting with people who eat in a healthy way, and plugging myself into communities that are concerned about health, especially brain health, and by pre-cutting my fruits and veggies and things like that so that they are ready to go. Okay. And so, the most successful people in the world surround themselves with people who inspire, guide, and will collaborate with them. And if you're in a situation like me where you've kind of grown up, you know, what did the one what did the so what did the one evaluator say? She said you're an overachiever in a family of underachievers and your support system stinks. And I was actually really offended because I have some amazing people in my family and in my past. Like, how dare you, right? But what I realized when I sat there and I analyzed my support system, I realized that she was right. I didn't have someone I could go to. I had people that were friends who were fairly independent people, but they were friends because we were all independent and we didn't require much of each other. So when I had that accident and I needed help, they couldn't weather that storm because that's not what they signed up for. And so I had to be intentional. And over the last couple of years, I've been intentional about building friendships and business partnerships and relationships with people who are no kidding on my team. And the first one that Cheryl recommends that you get is an expert mentor or coach. And I know we're getting a little bit over on time, but I think this is going to help you so much that I'm willing to give up the extra podcast time. All right. So when we become mentally tough, we're primed to receive the guidance from someone who has walked our path before us and we're ready to take consistent action, even if it's awkward or difficult at first. You might be surprised who is willing to step up, but they may not tap you on the shoulder and offer. It's important to be proactive and persistent when asking for help, even if you think the answer might be no. I've heard over and over again that the most successful people in the world ask for help frequently. And then she goes on to quote Kay Anders Erickson, internationally acclaimed researcher and the world's leading expert on the science of expertise, right? An expert on expertise. Real experts seek out constructive, even painful feedback. And so maybe you don't have access to somebody who can be a coach or a mentor for you. Maybe you don't feel like anybody's on your side today. Well, I'm on your side today. All right. And if you're listening to this on the podcast, you get yourself into that Building Wealth Together group and you're going to find positivity, uplifting, and encouragement. All right. But if you don't have the ability to bring a coach, a professional personal development specialist, there are things you can do. You can look at YouTube, books, online courses. You can declare to the world what it is you want to accomplish. I don't just post my workout pictures just because I want y'all to see the progress. I'm posting those pictures so that people will hold me accountable. And so that when so if I go a week without posting them, somebody's like, hey, what's going on? Right. Like also, set up positive rewards when you learn from whoever it is you're bringing into your life. Because one of the things a lot of us don't do is we don't celebrate our successes. I'm the worst for that, y'all. I get one thing accomplished and I'm like, great, done, move on to the next. And it's like, no, no, no. Take a few moments, celebrate the fact that you did that thing. All right. And then also this one here, set up negative consequences for yourself if you don't. So if you don't like picking up after dog or organizing the garage, well, let your family know you're going to be on the hook if you don't get X, Y, and Z done. All right. And so those are some things that you can do. One thing that's part of my personal growth plan is I have different conferences that I attend or different groups that I participate in. And those may change from year to year, but they are part of the plan. Like if I'm going to release one mastermind group, I'm going to do that in order to reach for one of a higher value or one at a more applicable stage in my growth. As we grow, we shouldn't be staying the same. Like the same mastermind group that did it for you 10 years ago shouldn't be the same one that's doing it now unless you guys are all growing together, right? So but adding those things in. So why do I go to the John Maxwell conference? Why do I go to enrichment? I'm still a little iffy on FinCon, just considering the racial dynamic, but why was I going from year to year? Because it was an avenue of personal growth and I knew I needed to build that in. So there's things that we can do. The reason that having someone else work, having somebody else into our life is the premise behind social influence theory. This is actually why Camp Gladiator works so well, because social influence is a very strong force for most of us, because the social influence means our behavior changes because of another person. That's what social influence means. And the reason it works is because we all want to comply with others, right? As human beings, we tend to conform to social pressure. So if everybody around us is working out and eating healthy, well, that's more of a motivation for us to work out and get healthy, right? Another thing is identification, when we are following somebody that we identify with. So if I have a leader in business that's done what I want to do, and I see a lot of my life reflected in theirs, and I want to see more of my life be like theirs, right? That's somebody I can identify with, and that motivates me to make the changes I need to make in order to achieve the goals of having more of a life like them. And then the third one that makes social so powerful is internalization. And this is where we accept the change and we change our behavior because of the intrinsic rewards. It's very important to make sure that we understand why we're doing what we're doing, that we're not just flitting around and bouncing around and, oh, this is great. Oh, this is great. Let me buy this tool. Let me buy this course. Okay. So that is going to wrap us up for today. There is quite a bit more in this chapter. Like, I already knew when I went through this chapter that I was going to have to do it all by itself and not 2 for 1 like I've been doing some of the others. Next week, we're going to get into objectives, and we're going to talk about objectives, and we're going to talk about having a noteworthy focus. That's all I have for you today. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And again, if you're listening on the Building Wealth Together podcast, I encourage you to join our Facebook group, Building Wealth Together. You can find that at facebook.com/groups/Build Wealth with JJ, and you will be able to get your money questions answered, as well as find a supportive, caring community of people who are on their mission to change the world with ethics and accountability and by building wealth. I'm JJ Conway. Thank you so much for joining us. Y'all take care. Love the podcast? Be sure to like, subscribe, and forward to 3 friends. You can ask a question or take a life-changing class at buildingwealthtogether.com. Now, go walk in abundance and leave a legacy.